Edgar Allan Poe was a master of creating short story elements. He's best known for creepy stories that focus on the psychological being of his characters. The Telltale Heart is one of his most well-known stories and one that illustrates him at his best. Observe how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Objects there was none. Passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye, with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. So I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and thus rid myself of the eye forever. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight I went to work. Every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of the door and opened it, oh so gently. And then, when I had made an opening, I put in a dark lantern, all closed, so that no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. And then I undid the lantern cautiously, oh so cautiously. I undid it just so that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights. But I found the eye always closed. And so it was impossible to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers. To think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he not even to dream my secret deeds or thoughts. I had my head in, and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped on the tin fastening. And the old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still, and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle. I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in bed listening, and presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. Death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped said victim. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it, you cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a simple dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot out from the opening crevice and fell full upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. And there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. The hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker, and louder every instant. And now at the dead hour of night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. I thought the heart must burst, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come, and with a loud yell I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only. His eye would trouble me no more. If you still think me mad, you will no longer think so when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head, the arms, and the legs, and then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot, whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught it all. There came a knocking at the street door, though. 3 police officers said a shriek had been heard by the neighbor in the middle of the night. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, had been my own amongst a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in country. My manner convinced them. They sat and chatted of familiar things. But ere long, my head began to ache, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still they sat and still chatted. The sound increased. I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased. It was a low, dull, quick sound, like that of a watch makes when involved in cotton. And still the men chanted pleasantly and smiled, as it grew louder, louder, and louder. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God! No, no, they heard. They suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. I felt that I must scream or die, and it arose from all over. Louder, 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 louder. I admit the deed, I shrieked. Tear up the planks, here and here. It is the beating of his hideous heart. Nervous, very redly nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not dulled them, not destroyed them. And above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in heaven and the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad?